right, let's put the women and children to bed and go looking for dinner. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now, getting you set for what should be another fantastic week of the greatest sport that we have on planet Earth. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we are the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want you to like and subscribe and get into the chat with your comments. I'm going to get to them later in the show because this show is about you, the college basketball fan, and that is never going to change. And again, a programming reminder that every Monday and Thursday during the 25-26 college basketball season, I will be coming to you with live episodes for this show and giving you everything you need to know about the sport. And remember, keep in mind, during the week, we are going to bring you interviews and also conversations with some of the biggest and the best names in the sport. It's something that, again, will come to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. But every single Monday and Thursday, I need an army with me. And we want you to be part of that army. So be all you can be and subscribe and like everything that's going on with Inside College Basketball Now. We are setting the table this week in college basketball for obviously more big non-conference games. Obviously, Thanksgiving week is going to feature big games on top of big games. It was an incredible weekend of college basketball, an epic game between Arizona and UCLA, which we'll get to on Friday night, plus a fun game between Houston and Auburn on Sunday. Some great stuff sandwiched in between. But as always, we start with three big things. And the first big thing today I want to get to, after watching every single morsel of college basketball I could throughout the first 2 weeks of the college basketball season in 25-26, to me right now, UConn and Purdue are the two best teams I've seen so far this season. Now, the Huskies played their first power conference opponent on Saturday night against BYU. In BYU at TD Garden in Boston. And I know that UConn was playing 90 minutes from his campus. I know that BYU got back in the game late, thanks to obviously a more accelerated style. I know that BYU was missing a starter on the wing in Kennard Davis Jr. and also lost another starter, Kebra Keita, to a concussion. But still watching UConn and watching the depth and watching the balance and watching everything that the Huskies had to offer, and then taking into account the fact that UConn is playing without Braylon Mullins, who, again, as we watch college basketball every single night, and we see another freshman come to the forefront, it feels like every single night, Braylon Mullins is capable of joining that conversation. Braylon Mullins is capable of breaking out and making 6 threes in a game for UConn. And at some point, Braylon Mullins is going to join a nucleus for the Huskies that already includes several players that are playing at an extremely, extremely high level. My biggest takeaways after watching UConn against BYU, the focal point for me coming into the season when it came to Dan Hurley's squad was obviously the fact that Solo Ball, I thought, had a chance to become one of the best guards in college basketball this season. It didn't happen against BYU. But with that said, other people came to the forefront. Silas the Virus Demery, the transfer from Georgia, made a statement and for the first time looked like he could give UConn at point guard what the Huskies had a couple of years ago when they had Tristan Newton at point guard. Remember, he was the point guard on back-to-back teams that won the national championship, was the most outstanding player in the 2024 Final Four. I also saw Tarris Reed, who I talked about last Thursday on Inside College Basketball Now as being slept on nationally, as somebody who, again, looks like he is going to be one of the best big men in the sport this season. Tarris Reed could be an All-American in 25-26. Tarris Reed has made monumental strides since last season when he was sharing the 5 spot with Samson Johnson. And Tarris Reed, very, very quietly, looks like a 20-10 guy so far out of the gate for UConn. But above all that, above all the buzz, and you better believe it's palpable, surrounding everything associated with UConn basketball, playing a game in Boston, obviously having a big game out of Silas Demery at point guard. The one storyline that I felt was not getting enough attention after the BYU game was the fact that Alex Karaban, the guy that has been the constant presence for the Huskies over the last 4 years, is unequivocally playing the best basketball of his career. I was at a UConn practice before the season, and I talked to Alex Karaban because he looked noticeably bigger, noticeably stronger. He really hit the weights hard in the offseason, but he's playing right now like a player that knows the hourglass is running out in his college career, and he's got one shot left to do something historical, and that's go to the Final Four and win a national championship for the third time in 4 seasons. Karaban right now shooting over 60 from three. He was 4 of 4 on Saturday night against BYU, and I want to say this as well. I was very impressed by BYU in defeat. BYU was down its best perimeter defender in Kennard Davis Jr. BYU was down Keba Keita, who went out of the game with a concussion. And BYU, thanks to the troika of A.J. Debinsa, who looked the part big time on Saturday night in Boston, Rob Wright and Richie Saunders, clawed its way back into the game. BYU showed me a lot in defeat. But the story was about UConn. The story was about seeing a UConn team without Braylon Mullins start to display potentially the type of depth that it had in 2023 when it went to the bench and it brought Donovan Clingan, Joey Calcaterra, Hassan Diarra off the bench and displayed that depth at the highest of levels en route to winning its first national championship. Now, here's the thing, too, we got to remember, and we have to always talk about this because we are building all this stuff, every big non-conference game, every big conference game, avoiding the epitome of brutality. We are building all this stuff for the path to Selection Sunday. And every game in this sport matters. Dan Hurley was in this studio months ago, and he talked about last year losing the game to Colorado and Maui and losing the game to Seton Hall and Newark probably cost UConn 2 seed lines. All of this matters. But the way that UConn's non-conference schedule stacks up, it favors the Huskies to be in a situation to cash in on these opportunities. Why do I say that? This week, Arizona comes to UConn. Next week, UConn gets Illinois at Madison Square Garden on Black Friday, 12:30 local time start. Then we go to December. UConn is at Kansas. Then we go to more games in December. UConn has Florida at MSG in a game in the Jimmy V Classic in a battle of the last 2 national champions. And then UConn will also host Texas. Why am I going through those 5 games? The only time UConn is going to be in a non-pro UConn setting is going to be the road game at Kansas, who, again, if you've heard me on this show, I feel is extremely, extremely vulnerable and has yet to prove it's anywhere close to being near vintage Kansas. And I'm going to get to that more in this show. But I'm looking at those games for UConn. Arizona and Texas are coming to the state of Connecticut to play UConn. Those are games the Huskies are going to be awfully tough to beat. And then Illinois and Florida are coming to the world's most famous arena. Those are going to be games that are going to be essentially a pseudo home game for the Huskies. It's why they call MSG Store South. So in 4 of the 5 big non-conference games that UConn has on its schedule, those games are going to be essentially feeling like UConn home games. UConn getting Braylon Mullins back here at some point soon is, to me, clearly in position to play its way to be a very high seed on Selection Sunday. And I've laid out what it would look like in the East region. You start in Philadelphia, you end in Washington, and then you get to a Final Four. I know it's only November, but you have to talk about these things. Now, looking at UConn, I think a big thing that has stood out to me has been how cemented the Huskies' role allocation has been. You know who your main guys are. It's Demery at the point. It's solo ball. It'll eventually be Braylon Mullins. Then you have Karaban and Reed. Off the bench, you have Malachi Smith, the change of pace point guard. You're going to have Jalen Stewart. You're going to have Eric Ryba. And Jaden Ross is a guy and I know it's really, really early in the season, but watching him on Saturday night and watching him over the last couple of games, he's averaging double figures in about 17 minutes per outing. I'm looking at Jaden Ross, and I'm saying to myself, if UConn can have the type of season that I think it can have, which is be a 1 seed in the NCAA tournament, go back to a Final Four, try and win another national title for the 3rd time in 4 years, Jaden Ross could play his way into the conversation to be one of the best reserves in college basketball. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I think it's something to monitor really, really close moving forward. I have talked ad nauseum all offseason about the collision course between UConn and St. John's. Collision course. Holy wars. These are the types of games you get out of family obligations for. I get out of family obligations regardless if it's college basketball season. Everybody knows not to bother me. But these are the types of games you get out of family obligations for. But I'll tell you, 2 weeks into the season, it doesn't look close between these two teams. UConn is so much more cemented. UConn is so much more in sync than what I've seen so far from St. John's. And looking at St. John's over the weekend, Rick Pitino started with a different starting lineup again. It's safe to say the only 2 players that are cemented firmly for Rick Pitino is Bryce Hopkins and Zuby Ejiofor. St. John's came off the bench the other night against William & Mary with Ian Jackson, Joe Zonsanen, and Dylan Mitchell. You just don't know where St. John's is right now in terms of a rhythm perspective, 1, 2, and 3. It's why, in my opinion, and I'm not saying UConn is necessarily going to be the team as of right now that I'm going to rank in the top 2, but the teams I've seen that have played the best have been Purdue and UConn. In the Rothstein 45 today, we're going to get to rings in a sec, I have Purdue 1, Houston 2, Arizona 3, because obviously Arizona has the wins against Florida and UCLA neutral. Slightly better resume than UConn right now, but obviously UConn's going to jump in the Rothstein 45 if they beat the Wildcats on Wednesday night. Now to Purdue. And I want to talk about the Boilers for a sec because there was this narrative that was spreading last week that Purdue might not be as good as we thought. And there was a narrative spreading that there was obviously maybe some holes in the Boilers and they weren't as good as we thought. But the truth of the matter is this. Purdue played its first games of the season without Trey Kaufman-Renn. And Trey Kaufman-Renn has come back with a vengeance and reiterated why he was an All-American last year and looks like right now he is primed to separate himself as the best big man in college basketball this season. I know that doesn't necessarily mean that he's the best NBA prospect, but as I've said time and time again, those are 2 completely different things. Through 2 games with Purdue, last night, which is Sunday night against Akron at Mackey Arena, and last Thursday's epic win at Alabama, Trey Kaufman-Renn is averaging 18 points and 15 rebounds. The back-to-back 15-rebound performances by Trey Kaufman-Renn were the 2 best rebounding numbers from a single game that he has ever had in his college career. 15. And now you start to see what Matt Painter was getting at. He wanted to give him more protection up front. Oscar Clough already, who had 14 and 14 against Akron, looks like a guy who is going to be one of the great glue guys in the sport this year, literally posing as Trey Kaufman-Renn's bodyguard, doing the dirty work, screening, picking up, obviously, like croutons off the salad plate, off the offensive glass, and putting them back in. But this notion that Purdue wasn't the best team last week when it lost its spot in the AP poll was nothing more than a miscarriage of justice. Purdue showed against Alabama its capabilities. That is the best win that we have seen so far this season. And Trey Kaufman-Renn early on is separating himself as the best big man in the sport and is rebounding the basketball at a much better rate than he ever has before. The back-to-back 15 rebound efforts were the best efforts that Trey Kaufman-Renn has had in his college career on the glass. And I got to thinking, and I got to forecasting Purdue's schedule. All coaches will tell you that they take things one game at a time. But watching Purdue operate at Mackey Arena, watching the rhythm and the chemistry that this team has. Braden Smith running things at the point of attack. Fletcher Lawyer looking like the best shooter in college basketball. Through 4 games, he's 14 of 27 from 3. I think if you look at Purdue's schedule, there is a real case to be made that the Boilers could enter 2026 with a perfect 13-0 record if Purdue can win 2 games in the Bahamas, in Baja Mar, this week in games that will be played on CBS Sports Network. Purdue starts the event Thursday against Memphis. Then if Purdue wins, it could get Texas Tech coming up on Friday in the championship game. If Purdue wins that game, these are the games that remain for the Boilers prior to 2026. Eastern Illinois in a bye game. At Rutgers. Iowa State at Mackey Arena. Minnesota at Mackey Arena. Marquette at Mackey Arena. Auburn in Indianapolis. And then Kent State at Mackey Arena. The hardest game in that run would be Texas Tech on a neutral site on Friday. But I'm telling you right now, there is a real case to be made that if Purdue can win 2 this week, again, the games will be on CBS Sports Network, I think you could see Purdue taking a 13-0 record into its first game of the new year in January against Wisconsin in Madison. But you know as well as I do, this is only November. And the big thing I'm thinking about now, because I'm always thinking about Selection Sunday, and I'm always thinking about what you're playing for to give yourself the best path to a Final Four. The Midwest Regionals this year are in Chicago, and that is a short ride from West Lafayette. Every game matters. And if you're Purdue, you got to be thinking about a real chance to run the table here for the rest of 2025 and put yourself in position to go to the Final Four for the second time in 3 years. So ironically enough, from my vantage point, 2 weeks into the season, the 2 best teams in college basketball are the 2 teams, UConn and Purdue, that played for the 2024 national title. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now. The second big thing that I'm thinking right now on this Monday after this.
Only CBS Sports can bring you big time during the heart of Saturday afternoons. It's big time.
It's big time. It's big time. It's big time.
On CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. Again, want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify. We want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also want to remind you to like and subscribe on YouTube. Get us to 100 likes on this show as we continue to build our army. Again, remember, live shows throughout the 25-26 season here at 1 o'clock Eastern every Monday and Thursday. We want you to be part of our army. Be all you can be. Now, the second big thing that I'm thinking about on this Monday is that Kansas is at an early crossroads. Now, on Saturday, after Kansas beat Princeton, Bill Self, postgame, said that Darryn Peterson is likely out for the immediate future with a nagging hamstring injury. This could not be coming at a worse time for the Jayhawks. Now, if you've heard me, I have questioned throughout the summer, throughout the preseason, and throughout the first couple of games for Kansas, if the supporting cast for the Jayhawks was good enough to give Darryn Peterson the type of support that he needed for Kansas to once again be one of the best teams in college basketball and play its way to be a top 16 protected seed on Selection Sunday. And if you take Darryn Peterson away from that, you are going to have a lot of early season struggles coming up if you're the Kansas Jayhawks. Because even with Darryn Peterson, I still question the supporting cast for Kansas. And without him, Kansas was in a possession game in the second half with a Princeton team that lost Xavion Lee as a transfer to Florida and lost Caden Pierce, who was one of their best players, to the transfer portal. This is not vintage Princeton. This is not the Tosan Awoa Princeton that we remember from 2023 that was a part of the Princeton team that went to the Sweet 16 under Mitch Henderson. So we'll see just how long Darryn Peterson is out. It's a major disservice to college basketball, and it's an unfortunate circumstance for college basketball if he does miss an extended period of time. But hamstrings are things that can nag for a really, really long time unless they're taken care of. But early on in the season, if Kansas and this rendition of Kansas does not have Darryn Peterson, they could be in for an incredibly, incredibly difficult stretch. Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden, Kansas is going to get Duke in the Champions Classic at the Mecca. Without Darryn Peterson, that, in my opinion, will be at least a 15-point win for the Blue Devils. But beyond that, this is what's staring Kansas down right now coming up. Next week in the Players Era Festival, Notre Dame and Syracuse are guaranteed opponents. The third game is TBD. They need Darryn Peterson to beat Notre Dame and Syracuse on a neutral court. Notre Dame and Syracuse are both improved from last season. Then after Vegas, you got Dan Hurley and UConn coming to Fog Allen Fieldhouse in early December. And then there's a neutral site game, pseudo, in Kansas City against Missouri. Pseudo neutral site game. It'll be pro Kansas, but that's still a hard opponent. It's not of Darryn Peterson. Hopefully he's back. And then you have at NC State. Even with those players, that is a murderer's row type of slate for Bill Self in Kansas. And I'll say this. Just when you think about the totality of Kansas's remaining schedule, Kansas has 27 regular season games remaining before the Big 12 tournament. 25 of those games are against power conference opponents. So even if you had Darryn Peterson, how many of those 25 games are the Jayhawks going to win? Can they go 18-7? Can they go 17-8? Don't be surprised if Kansas is once again a double-digit loss team. And the next time we see the Jayhawks, it will be Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden against a Duke team that, in my opinion, is, I don't want to say off the radar, but I think the long-term defensive potential of Duke is the long-term defensive potential of a team that can get back to the Final Four. And I'm watching very closely at my guy Dame Sarr on the wing, who I love, and I've loved since I saw him in practice, and what happens at point guard with Caleb Foster and Cam Boozer. Now, unless Darryn Peterson goes into the phone booth and becomes, Superman and plays, this takes a little bit of air out of the Champions Classic because we could have a blowout in one of the games. That makes the game between Kentucky and Michigan State the showcase game in the Champions Classic on Tuesday night at Madison Square Garden. Michigan State has the signature win over Arkansas, but Michigan State still feels like a team that could be standing on the tip of Montauk with a handful of pebbles and not get anything in the ocean. Spartans right now as a team are 13 of 60 from three. They were 1 of 14 from three against Arkansas. Still won the game. Jackson Kohler, as I talked about a lot in the preseason, has emerged as the go-to guy for this team. He's averaging a double-double, 14-13. Remember, he was Michigan State's best player against Auburn last March in the NCAA tournament in the Elite Eight loss. But Michigan State needs more offense. Again, we got 4 guys cemented for the Spartans. Fears, Konkar, Cooper, Jackson Kohler, and then we're kind of rotating guys at the 5th spot. And this is not the last time that Tom Izzo is going to play a blue blood before the Big Ten starts. Michigan State has got North Carolina coming up on Thanksgiving Day in Florida, and Michigan State will also host Duke in East Lansing on December 6th. So the Spartans are coming up on a stretch where in about 2.5 weeks, they're going to play 3 of the sport's premier blue bloods. And I don't think Michigan State is going to be able to be legitimately viewed as a team that can get to a Final Four until it finds some sort of perimeter offense, somebody who can take the ball and go get a bucket. And what about Kentucky? What about the Wildcats? Well, Mark Pope, after the win on Friday night, by-game win, went to the press conference and gave a quote that he thought and wished that this group would be further along. Well, I don't want to say it's Murphy's Law, but Kentucky has had unfortunate circumstances at two incredibly key spots. Jalen Lowe, the transfer from Pitt, has had multiple issues with his shoulder in the last month. Jalen Lowe was brought to Rupp Arena to spray the ball around and be in a situation where he could get people buckets. He has not been near 100%. I text messaged and texted with his father, Marlon Lowe, last night and asked if there were any updates. He said Jalen is still rehabbing. There's no timetable for a return. So you take away the player you brought in to magnify and amplify all this great depth you have. Now, with him out of the lineup, it looks like the five that Mark Pope will turn to: Denzel Aberdeen, Colin Chandler, Otega Owe, Mohamed Diabate, and Brandon Garrison. And again, I'm not so sure that Brandon Garrison would be the starting center if Jaden Quaintance was healthy, the transfer from Arizona State, who's coming off an ACL injury. Jaden Quaintance, if he's healthy, is a National Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But right now, Kentucky is not as far along as Mark Pope hoped because you have issues health-wise protecting the rim at the 5 spot with Jaden Quaintance, who I think is a National Defensive Player of the Year candidate, and you have issues at point guard. Those are things that cannot be understated. But now, with the situation with Darryn Peterson, unless he can miraculously play on Tuesday night at the Garden, Kentucky-Michigan State becomes the game that is the showcase game in this event. And it's a big-time spot for Kentucky at the Garden. Regardless of whether or not Kentucky is healthy, with the money that was reportedly spent on this roster, you have to perform like you're one of the best teams in the country. And I was always taking a little bit of a pause on the Wildcats. And I'm always taking a little bit of a pause on a team that surrenders the amount of points that Kentucky did last week against Louisville, giving up 96. It's going to be real interesting to see how they perform against Michigan State coming up Tuesday night at the Garden. Now, the third big thing I want to talk about, there were great games all weekend. Houston-Auburn was a lot of fun on Sunday. Stephen Pearl did a great job, came up a bucket short in his first big game in Birmingham. Houston came away with a tremendous win. Kingston Flemings was sensational. We'll get to him later on. But the game of the weekend, unequivocally, was the game between Arizona and UCLA at Intuit Dome on Friday night in Los Angeles. Now, watching this game, you saw the value of player retention. Watching this game, you saw the value of having veteran guards. Because when the game was hanging in the balance, just as he did against Florida on opening night in Las Vegas, Jaden Bradley came to the rescue for Arizona. Anthony Del Orso, a player that really stood out to me when I was at Arizona practice before the season, made some big-time shots for Arizona. And Arizona's defense and physicality and clogging opportunities for UCLA also came to the forefront. And I want to give a shout-out to Tommy Lloyd, and we thank him for coming on Inside College Basketball Now last week for playing the type of schedule that he's playing. Arizona flew to Los Angeles last week to play UCLA and then flew to Connecticut, or will fly to Connecticut, to play UConn on Wednesday night. Those places aren't down the street from each other. But Arizona is putting itself in position with the opening night win over Florida, with the win over UCLA, and Arizona is still going to play San Diego State, UConn, Alabama and Birmingham, and Auburn at home. Arizona is putting itself in position to be a really high seed in the NCAA tournament. Now, I want to get to UCLA for a sec. I thought UCLA's guard play was really poor. Donovan Dent, Sky Clark combined were 8 of 27 from the field. I thought UCLA's ball security was really poor. Bruins had 12 turnovers in the first half. I thought UCLA's rebounding was really poor. Arizona out-rebounded UCLA 35-28. And UCLA's interior defense, especially when the game hung in the balance late, was really, really poor. And with that said, UCLA had an 8-point lead in this game with 7 minutes to play. An 8-point lead with 7 minutes to play, with poor guard play, poor ball security, poor rebounding, and poor interior defense. If UCLA can clean those things up, the Bruins have the requisites to be really, really good. The big question for UCLA entering the season was obviously around the 5 spot. I saw enough from Xavier Booker and from Steven Jamerson, whose really minutes and value you can't measure in the box score, to believe that UCLA is going to have enough at the 5. Xavier Booker, 10 points, 7 rebounds, a block shot, asserted himself, made a couple of threes. He looked more than serviceable at the 5. The issue for UCLA against Arizona was its guard play. And if that can be rectified, if we can see the Donovan Dent and Sky Clark that we saw in the exhibition games against UC Irvine and San Diego State, UCLA will be firmly in the mix at the top of the Big Ten. But I do know this. The one place I wouldn't want to be this week is UCLA practice. That will not be PG rated. Want to get your thoughts in the chat about everything that happened this weekend in college basketball. Want to get your thoughts on everything that's going to happen in the week ahead in college basketball. We're going to get into the chat when we return. Jon Rothstein here on Inside College Basketball Now.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
All right, Jon Rothstein back here on Inside College Basketball Now. Time to get to your questions in the chat. Riggs wants to know, John, will Arizona be your number 1 after they beat UConn? I'd have to think long and hard of it. Arizona, without question, would jump to number 2 in my poll if Arizona were to win at Gampel Pavilion. But Purdue did win a game at Alabama. And I know Purdue has not had as many opportunities at Arizona, but Arizona would definitely jump Houston and go to 2 if they are to beat UConn Wednesday night at Gampel Pavilion. Trey Meismer says, John, come on now. The Cougs are inevitable. Our vets don't even need to score. We just dish it to the freshmen. Hey, look, UConn's in a situation where it looks to me like it's going to have one of the best freshmen in the country in Braylon Mullins. I really believe that. Houston also has guys that are going to join that conversation, and Kingston Flemings joined it with what he did on Sunday against Auburn. 20 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds. Chris Sinak is also getting more acclimated. I'll say this. Houston's freshmen are coming along a lot faster than I thought they would after I did the opening game against Lehigh on opening night on CBS Sports Network. Let's keep going right now. Smash that like button as we continue here to go through your questions. A lot of people fired up right now. We want to get to 100 likes. Thomas R6570 says UConn is the best team in college basketball. I think Purdue takes a couple of losses. He's obviously now referencing what I brought up in the first segment when I looked at Purdue's schedule. Look, I am just making this point. If you look at Purdue's schedule, if they get by Memphis on Thursday and then beat Texas Tech and JT Toppin on Friday, which again will be on CBS Sports Network, where is Purdue going to lose after that? Is Purdue going to go on the road and lose to Rutgers this season? I don't think Rutgers is capable of that, at least not right now from what I've seen. I know that Purdue has hard games in the state of Indiana. I don't see Auburn going to Indy and beating Purdue. I don't see Iowa State or Marquette beating Purdue at Mackey Arena. I'm going to say it again. If Purdue can win 2 games this week in Baha Mar, I think Purdue will take a 13-0 record into 2026. Keep going here with the questions. Pat says that Purdue only goes 6 or 7 deep. The other teams in the top 15 at least go 9 to 10 deep. Well, I'm going to share something with you right now. It's a quote that Mike Bray gave me when I was at a Notre Dame practice years ago. Depth is overrated in games and it's underrated in practice. And I asked this to Matt Painter when he was on the show in October. And he even said, everybody loves to talk about how great it is to have depth. If you do that and you play 9, 10, 11, 12 guys, your best players aren't playing more. The best teams, I find, always play somewhere between 7 and 8 guys. You look at Purdue, you look at the usage that they're getting right now out of their guys, you know who is going to be there for them in terms of high usage. Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, Trey Kaufman-Wren. Now, other people can have pockets of success on a given night, but the best teams have guys that are high usage. Keep going right now. Keep going. Is anybody else? Anybody else have anything here? We got a lot of UConn and Purdue people getting into it. Now, people are saying that UConn was hanging on for dear life. BYU is not good. UConn still had to build a lead. UConn still had to get separation to be up, 20-ish type points in that game. I know BYU was playing UConn 90 minutes from UConn's campus, but I'm thinking long-term, and I'm thinking about what's going to win in the NCAA tournament. UConn has vastly better guard play than it did a year ago. Solo Ball is somebody, to me, who's one of the best players in the Big East. Wouldn't shock me if he pushes for All-American honors. Alex Caravan, as I hit on, is playing the best basketball of his college career. And Taras Reed is somebody that America continues to sleep on, but I think is another guy who can be an All-American. I'm looking at UConn and Purdue as the two best teams I've seen so far this season. More questions here. A lot of UConn and BYU talk. Let's go to FSU for life, some Georgetown talk. Will my Hoyas be ranked this week? I did not rank Georgetown on my AP Top 25 bracket, but I will say this. Georgetown, to me, is inching closer and closer to being in the conversation of being the third best team in the Big East behind UConn and St. John's. That is where we are shifting a bit when it comes to the Hoyas. One more question before we transition to something new here. Nate MXB says, John, is Louisville good enough to win a national title right now? Do they still need a little more from the bigs? Well, Louisville's offense has been awesome to start the season. The perimeter with McNeely, Michael Brown, Ryan Conwell looks to be the best in the sport. But I want to see Louisville more in non-traditional settings at the Yum Center against better competition. Louisville is going to play Cincinnati later this week. Louisville's also got games coming up with Indiana. They're going to play Tennessee in December. They're going to play at Arkansas as part of the ACC SEC Challenge. So more stern tests are coming for the Cardinals. That's obviously something that we want to look at and evaluate as we continue to move forward here. Now, we're going to try something new when we do our Monday shows, because Monday is the day that the AP poll comes out. Now, I am somebody who has always filed his own ballot and then not gotten too into where somebody is ranked, where somebody isn't ranked, because I am somebody who always looks at the overall resume. I am not so sure why so many people get worked up over rankings with a sport that's decided by a 68-team tournament. But we are going to look right now at today's AP poll, which was just released. Now, Purdue, Houston, UConn, Arizona. The only difference I have right now is I have Arizona ahead of UConn because Arizona has 2 neutral site wins. I don't have Duke this high. I have Alabama higher than these teams, than Duke, Louisville, and Michigan, because Alabama won a true road game at St. John's and lost to the number 1 team at Purdue. So I don't understand how you can't have Alabama there in the mix, because Duke won a game in Charlotte against Texas. I know Duke played at Army, but I want to reward the teams that go on the road. and Alabama had, I believe, the second best road win we've seen so far this season, the other being Purdue's win at Alabama. So I would definitely have Alabama in the mix here. Can we keep going and keep looking here? This is similar to what I have. I have Illinois, I believe, 9 and BYU 10. Florida's still outside the top 10 for me, but this is still somewhat similar to what I have. Not too crazy. I don't understand how Alabama is 11 with that road win at St. John's, who I had third to start the season. I have Gonzaga in this neighborhood. I have Michigan State higher than most because Michigan State beat Arkansas. I had Arkansas higher than Kentucky. Gonzaga is about in that neighborhood where I have them ranked. I don't mind that. St. John's, 14, I'm fine with. So now, Texas Tech, Iowa State, Michigan State. I think I would have Arkansas a lot higher than this because Arkansas went on the road and played a road game and lost in the final minute. So I think Arkansas is very undervalued at 21. Arkansas going to play Duke Thanksgiving night on CBS. Michigan State, I would probably have about 5 spots higher. I'm not in a position right now where I will put Iowa State that high. I would maybe move Iowa State 4 to 5 spots back because Iowa State's best win so far was a neutral site game over a Mississippi State team that didn't have Jaden Epps. That's just me. So I would have Arkansas probably and Iowa State flipped or close to that. Let's finish it out here, 22 through 25. I don't have Kansas ranked. Kansas is somewhere between 25 and 30. I have Auburn. I moved down to 25, and I don't have North Carolina State ranked. They were 26 in my ballot. So a couple of things that obviously are a little different, but for the most part, I don't have too much of a problem with the AP poll. I have Ohio State in there because Ohio State has a power conference win over Notre Dame. Really good game on Sunday. Let's get the 3 good nuggets right here as we put a bow on this show. Nugget number 1, respect the king. Talking about Kingston Flemings at Houston, I touched on it. He's been great his last 2 games with his ball security, 16 assists to 4 turnovers, 20.5 points, 8 assists, 5 rebounds in his last 2. The freshman for Houston coming along at a really, really nice pace. Houston's 2 guaranteed games next week in the Players Era Festival are Tennessee and Syracuse in Vegas. Those are guaranteed. The 3rd game is to be determined. Houston last year was 4-3 after 7 games, lost 2 games in Vegas. Cougars may have a better record this year. I'm not sure the team is as good, but Houston not in a position, in my opinion, to take too many L's next week in Vegas. Nugget number 2, urban legend. Florida's backcourt has been a major, major concern for me at the start of the season. Watch the game Sunday night against Miami. Boogie Fland and Xavion Lee, a combined 3 of 16 from the field and 0 of 10 from three-point range. The guy that really is balancing the floor for Florida is Urban Klavzar, who with his shooting is adding great spacing on offense. And I know he's a guy that can make some shots, but he's also a really high IQ player who adds great balance to the floor. Klavzar is a guy, in my opinion, that is under the radar for the defending national champions and can really, really extend the defense. This is something to monitor for Florida moving forward. Nugget number 3, Hoya paranoia. Well, Georgetown and Ed Cooley continue to take a step forward and continue to look like a team, as I mentioned earlier in the show, that could be in the conversation among the top 3 teams in the Big East. But if you're the Big East right now, you got to be concerned about how many NCAA tournament bids you could get in 2026. And that is why the next month is going to be so pivotal for this conference. You have already had 2 teams lose bye games in the Big East. DePaul lost to Buffalo. Xavier lost to Santa Clara. The 2 teams that have been constants for this league, Marquette and Creighton, are 0-3 in their power conference opportunities. Marquette lost at home on Saturday to Maryland, who had multiple starters out, and Marquette lost to Indiana in Chicago, and Creighton was blown out at Gonzaga. So the games that the Big East plays during the non-conference portion of the schedule are going to be extremely critical to the health of this league. And remember this, when you play a double round robin format, if you're playing a team that does not help you statistically, you have everything to lose and nothing to gain. And if we see teams at the bottom, like a Xavier, like a DePaul, last year was Seton Hall, with bad metrics, you are looking then maybe at 4 to 6 conference games against teams where you don't really get any credit for winning, but everything could go wrong with your season if you lose. It is a dangerous, dangerous thing to navigate. I think if you look at the Big East, and I think now if you look at the teams other than St. John's and UConn that have played the best, Georgetown is clearly 3. And I also think you got to look at what Kevin Willard and Villanova are doing in the other spot. Now, Villanova, who played very well opening night against BYU in Las Vegas, is in a situation where it still has multiple opportunities. Villanova, by the way, will play LaSalle on CBS Sports Network on Wednesday. Villanova still has a road game at Michigan, Wisconsin at the Wells Fargo Center in downtown Philadelphia, and Pitt at home. So the Big East needs to get something out of Villanova and Georgetown, who look to me like the most capable teams behind UConn and St. John's. 3 games to watch before our next show on Thursday at 1 o'clock. The Champions Classic at the Garden will put as 1. Then you have on Wednesday night, Alabama and Illinois at the United Center, UConn and Arizona coming up in Connecticut. That should be a fun game between 2 top 5 teams. And a little programming note, we will have Illinois head coach Brad Underwood here on Inside College Basketball Now coming up Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. Eastern. So you want to obviously stay tuned to that. And 3 under-the-radar games to monitor. VCU at NC State tonight. That's Monday night. Will Wade against his old team. Villanova at LaSalle, a Big 5 game coming up on Wednesday. And then also Dayton and Marquette hooking up as well this week in the back end of a home-and-home series. Lots to get to. Want to remind you to subscribe to Inside College Basketball Now on both Apple and Spotify when we want to be your Bible for the college basketball season and beyond. Once again, we're the only college basketball podcast coming to you 52 weeks out of the calendar year. Also, want to make sure that you continue to like and subscribe on YouTube and be part of our army, because we need you to be all you can be. And we will be coming to you with live shows every Monday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern throughout the 25-26 season. Be with us on every one. You talk for 49 minutes, this is what happens. Tuesday, 8 a.m. Eastern, Jon Rothstein with Brad Underwood. Everything you want to know about the Illini, everything on Wednesday's matchup with Alabama. Until then, this has been another edition of Inside College Basketball Now.